So this is book 4 in the series. So this section comes from chapter 3. And so this is my second Australian character, who is Florence, who has not long arrived back in London with her parents. She's widowed. She desperately wants to be allowed to work with her father. Her father is an architect who has come back after not having a successful career in Australia. And her father has hired an assistant, much to her disgust, who is Johannes Hempel, who is one of the sons in the Hempel family who lives at number 3 on Honeysuckle Street. So book 3 is about his older sister, Rosanna, and this is his story. So he is very excited to be an assistant to an architect. He has met her once before in this scene, so she is not at all impressed with him, and he is absolutely smitten with her because he's never met someone who is so casually comfortable and sees the world the same as him before. So this is their dynamic in this scene, and it's from Florence's point of view. Very important thing to add, Florence lives with chronic pain. Anyway, let's go. Some days began with a whimper, others with a persistent ache that doled over the morning. Some began with an eye-watering slap of pain that shocked, radiated, and did not let go. Today began with a slap. Florence splayed her palm against the cold and uneven wallpaper. She pushed a roll onto her back. The pain flared, then faded, and with a teeth-clenching effort, she rolled again and forced herself upright. Unwillingly, the mantra from the early years chimed in her ears and found voice on her lips. A test, a penance, a suffering. Like her pain might have an end or set allocation, she just had to withstand before it would fly from her body. When young, she'd been convinced that if only she were good enough, stoic enough, and pious enough, then it would all end. She knew better now. The fogginess of a broken night leached. Florence breathed until it cleared. In the hall, the clock chased the fleeting hours of the morning to chime out 11 steady bongs. After it had finished, she listened for a chair scrape or a cough or muttering, but the upper floors remained as silent as dust. Her mother had a way of sensing when she needed to sleep and had likely, today, spared her the tedium of errands and visits. With a wobble, she stood. Mama had laid out her wrapper, and Florence wrestled herself into her corset, then slipped it on and pulled the tie at her waist. Today would it be an inside day, but that did not have to mean it was a wasted day. She would read the latest issue of The Builder, and in the afternoon might begin the book her father had bought or flip through some catalogues. And that meant a trip to the office. Left, right, left, right. Florence gripped the banister as she descended from the building's home layer to its work layer. In the entrance, the scent of dry paper, paint powder, and ink laced the air. She set off down the hall, her mind already bounding with thoughts of innovations and articles. He stepped into the doorframe. She stopped. The hallway narrowed to a rectangle of light, now partially blocked by the tall silhouette. Only a flash of light from a buckle or a button gave any definition to the man who spent his days at the drawing table where she had once sat. He stood side on before the bookcase. One hand rested on the shelf. The other held a book in one substantial splayed hand. He licked his fingertip, then turned a page. A tingling ran from Florence's heels, along her calves, right through her torso where it spread to each point in her body. Then it warmed and pinched in an appalling betrayal of what should have been her sustained disdain for this man who had so effortlessly taken her place. The cotton of his shirt hugged his muscular biceps, and the floral embroidery on his coat sat at odds with his rude strength. His trousers sat just a little tighter over his firm buttocks before they fell in a straight line of obedience down the length of his legs. Every bit of him hard and unwavering. There was not a hint of indulgence or weakness about him. He lifted his reading spectacles to sit on top of his head as he rubbed his eyes before lowering them again. Licked his fingertip, turned another page. If a man was to take her place, he may as well be a well-composed man. Florence kept her hand half raised for balance as she traversed the last few feet of the hallway. On days like today, when the cold bullied its way beneath the door and between window sashes, she would normally use her cane, even around the house. but seeing him in the office filled her with a determination not to show weakness. This city would not beat her. As she stepped into the room, the assistant looked up from his book. He flicked her a small smile, then lowered his head again. When he looked up again, it was as if he was blinking his way free of a haze. Mrs. Murray, your father isn't in. He is meeting with a client, a potential one, I mean. He snapped the book closed and took 2 steps back before colliding against his drawing table. A brush rolled and dropped to the floor. I'm not here to see my father, Florence said. Probably scared at being caught while distracted, the assistant was as skittish as a new foal. He bent and grasped the brush from the floor, then set it back into place. You aren't? That same lazy smile turned his lips. He tugged at his waistcoat. I had been wanting to speak with you about... A knot of pain tightened in her shoulder, and his words were lost in the flare. I am here for a book, Florence snapped, and then added, a little more softly, I wish to read by the hearth. I can suggest, might I recommend, if you are wanting a recommendation, that is. Florence had never been lost for words. How could she be when she had so few opportunities to voice them? They jostled against one another as she itched to wedge them into small spaces as egalitarian observations, beneath it all begging to be taken seriously. The imposter perhaps had space in spades for words, because he erred and eyed some more, then strode forward and drew a weighty tome from the shelf. Even he had to clasp it with 2 hands. She would never be able to carry it upstairs, but as she read the spine, she huffed her dismissal. She didn't want to read it anyway. Ruskin? The 7 Lamps. Have you read it? He asked. Yes, and I regret every minute spent with it. Florence crossed to the shelves and scanned the spines. Reference material, old catalogues, manuals and guides. Where were the newer books? The latest edition of The Builder or the architectural magazine? What was the point of being in London if she could not read the latest news while it was the latest, not receive it months after it had crossed the seas? You don't like Ruskin? Florence paused at her spine tapping. That was interesting. When provoked, it seemed the lackey had spirit. My father has hired a Ruskinite, she said as she pivoted to face him, but too fast, and pain flamed in her knee, then across her back. She bit the inside of her cheek. He's an eloquent writer and an excellent illustrator. Men in Sydney use his drawings as templates for stonework and motifs. And no one summarizes a solution to free the cities from the vices of industry like him. If, like he says, industry took second place and society placed more emphasis on crafts and workmanship, on proper handmade things again, then the poor would be able to provide for their families once more. One of the greatest losses to the modern world is the loss of the craftsman. The craftsman hoarded power. Everyday people could not access the teachings they needed, could not learn to improve their lives. Why would they not do so again if they returned? I'm not talking about guilds in the cities. He picked each word with delicate deliberateness. I'm talking about the skills of the village, back when there was pride in creating something by hand, perfectly crafted and unique, instead of the same thing replicated by machines over again. The work of master craftsmen. The world could find its way back. Craftsman, no wonder father likes you. He lowered the book and pulled it against his chest. Red bloomed on his cheeks and he shook his head. You haven't been here long, and perhaps you haven't seen what I have. The old ways give us a path out of this. The workers deserve better. Working man, always the working man. And in your utopian world, where we all discard steam and factories and embrace the old, I assume all the men are passing on their knowledge to their sons. Where does the working woman feature in your handmade dream? I can guess she is where she has always been, in kitchens at the copper or dying of childbirth as she brings a longed-for son or disappointing daughter into the world. Machines let a woman's hands do what men have done for decades. Did you figure that in your perfect past? You play with my words. You ascribe the views of others to me. He took a breath, not just a regular one, but a passionate inhalation, as if readying himself for an intellectual onslaught. Then he softly exhaled and looked to the floor, frowned and swallowed. He was holding back. Why? Of course, she was his employer's daughter, and arguing with her would do him no good. Florence turned away from his discomfort. She grasped at a book, any book, focusing only on finding a size she could carry. It no longer mattered. She would not read now. and without a word or a look, she walked the small hall, and once out of sight, let the banister take her weight. The light in the hallway dulled with his shadow, but thankfully cleared again as he moved away. Florence took the first step, left, right, then the next, left, right. It was wrong to hate him, but in that moment she did. He had everything she wanted, a strong body and a seat at the drafting table. He'd have a career and a future in a world made for him, a world she would be grateful to have just a little of. If he had to deal with a little of her ire, then so be it.